Daf Yomi, Tractate Menachos, page 87b. With the top of the page, the words V'chachamim omrim. V'chachamim omrim, lo haya Hashem, ela yisrael echad, shenemar v'yisrael echad, lekevez echad, im kein ma'atam alam, v'yisrael yisrael, l'rabbis chatzi yisrael. Then the rabbis disagree with Rabbi Meir, and they say there was only one measuring vessel that held a tenth of an ephah there in the temple, as it is stated, and 1/10 part of every lamb. Numbers 29:4. But if so, what is the meaning when the verse states a tenth for every lamb? Numbers 28:29. Rabbi Meir derived from the repetition of a tenth that there were two measuring vessels that held a tenth of an ephah. How do the rabbis expound that? They hold it serves to include another measuring vessel for dry substances, one that holds 1/2 of a tenth of an ephah. The Rabbi Meir, Chatzi Sarim Minale, Nafkale Misaroin, Me V'isarin Derabanan Vav Ledarshi. Having cited the Braita, the Gemara discusses each opinion. And as for Rabbi Meir, from where does he derive that there was a measuring vessel that he held 1/2 of a tenth of an ephah? He derives it from the superfluous and in the phrase, and 1/10 part for every lamb. The Gemara asks, and as for the rabbis, why don't they expound this from the term and? They do not derive anything from and. They hold that the addition of the word is not significant enough to be expounded. Okay? Rabbi Meir, Hai visorin echad lekeves echad mai avid le, hahu shelo yimdod lo b'shel shloisha laparo velo b'shel shnayim la'el. The Gemara asks, and as for Rabbi Meir, this verse, and 1/10 part for every lamb, from which the rabbis derive that there was only one measuring vessel of a tenth of an ephah, what does he do with it? The Gemara answers, that verse teaches that one should not measure the flour by using a measuring vessel of a size that holds the entire volume of flour required, meaning neither with a vessel that holds 3/10 of an ephah for the meal offering accompanying the sacrifice of a bull, nor with a vessel that holds 2/10 of an ephah for the meal offering accompanying the sacrifice of a ram. Rather, one measures the flour for them by using the 10th ephah measuring vessel multiple times. The Rabbanan afkelehu b'nikudei Tanya Amar Rav Yossi lama nakud vav shebe'emtza isaroin shel isaroin rishon shel Yom Tov arishon shel Chag shelo yimdod lo b'shel shloish shel apor lo b'shel shnayim la'el. Rabbi Meir nikudei lo darish. The Gemara asks, and as for the rabbis, from where do they derive the halacha? The Gemara explains they derive it from this dot. In the Torah text, a dot appears above the term a tenth. This is as it is taught in the Braita. Rabbi Yossi says, why is the letter Vav in the middle of the term a tenth dotted the first time, and the term a tenth appears in the verse concerning the first festival day of the festival of Sukkot? The verse there states, and a tenth for every lamb of the 14 lambs. Numbers 29:15. This serves to teach that one should not measure flour using a vessel of a size that holds the entire volume required, meaning neither with a vessel that holds 3/10 of an ephah for the meal offering of a bull, nor with a vessel that holds 2/10 of an ephah for the meal offering of a ram. As for Rabbi Meir, what does he derive from the dot? He does not derive anything from the dot. He holds that the dot is not significant enough to be expounded. Chatzi soin ma hayash mishamesh. One moment. Okay, where were we? Right. Chatzi isaron ma haya mishamesh shebo haya moded chavite kohen gadol. The Mishnah teaches what purpose did the 1/2 of a tenth of an ephah measuring vessel serve. It was the vessel with which one would measure the flour for the high priest's griddle cake offering. A tenth of an ephah was required each day. He sacrificed half in the morning and the other half in the afternoon. From the Mishnah, it appears that each half-tenth is measured separately. Moded urabin chavite kohen gadol lo hayu bain chatzaim ela mevi saron shalem mechotzeu. The Mishnah indicates that the half-tenth vessel is used for measuring, and the Gemara raises a contradiction to this from a Mishnah 50b. The 12 loaves of matzah baked from a tenth of an ephah of flour of the griddle cake offering of the high priest did not come from the house of the high priest in halves. Rather, the high priest brings from his house a complete tenth of an ephah of flour, see Leviticus 6:13, and divides it in half. He sacrifices half in the morning and half in the afternoon. It is apparent from this Mishnah that the tenth of an ephah is first measured in its entirety and only then divided. Amar Rav Sheshes my moded nami di katani michalek. To resolve the contradiction, Rav Sheshes said, what is the meaning of used for measuring that the Mishnah here teaches? It means only that the high priest would divide the tenth of an ephah into 2 equal portions using the half-tenth measure, but the quantity would initially be measured in its entirety, as the Mishnah on 50b states. Ba minei rami machama merav chizda chatzi isaron navi meir gadush haya omer chakuk haya. In light of Rabbi Meir's opinion that there were 2 vessels for measuring the tenth of an ephah, one that held its measure when leveled and one when it was heaped, Rami Bar Chama raised a dilemma before Chizda with regard to the 1/2 of a tenth of an ephah measuring vessel. According to the opinion of Rabbi Meir, was it one that held its measure when heaped, or was it one that held its measure when leveled? The siman is Chatzi Chavite Shulchan. Before citing Rav Chizda's response, the Gemara provides a mnemonic that alludes to 3 dilemmas it will immediately present. Half, griddle cake offering, table, this half, griddle cake offering and table. This alludes to 1/2 of a tenth of an ephah, the high priest's griddle cake offering, and the showbread table. Gadush haya omechukaya. Rav Chizda said to Rabbi Chama, why do you ask specifically with regard to the opinion of Rabbi Meir? The dilemma can be raised according to the opinion of the rabbis as well. Rabbi Chama answered, according to the opinion of the rabbis, it would be with regard to the measuring vessel of the tenth of an ephah itself that one raises the dilemma, asking whether it was one that held its measure when heaped, or was one that held its measure when leveled. The dilemma I raised concerning the half-tenth vessel, which is pertinent, specifically according to the opinion of Rabbi Meir, as he holds that there were both heaped and leveled measuring vessels of a tenth of an ephah. Amar le means that Rabbi Meir Nishma Rabbi Meir Umedin Rabbi Meir Nishma Labanan. In answer to Rabbi Chama's dilemma, Rabbi Chizda said to him, from The opinion of Rabbi Meir concerning the vessel of a tenth of an ephah, we can extrapolate what Rabbi Meir holds concerning the vessel of 1/2 of a tenth of an ephah. And from that opinion of Rabbi Meir, we can extrapolate what the rabbis hold concerning both vessels. Midi Amar Rabbi Meir Isara Machuk Chatzi Sahoin Nami Machuk Midi Rabbi Meir Machuk Rabbanan Nami Machuk. Rav Chizda elaborates from the fact that Rabbi Meir said that the vessel of a tenth of an ephah used for the high priest's griddle cake offering held its measure when leveled. We can extrapolate that the vessel of 1/2 of a tenth as well was such that it held its measure when leveled. It is reasonable that since both vessels were used for the same offering, they should be of the same type. And from the fact that Rabbi Meir holds that vessels used for the high priest's griddle cake offering held their measures when leveled, we can extrapolate that also according to the rabbis who hold that both vessels were used for the high priest's griddle cake offering, both of them held their measures when leveled. Chaviti Kohen Gadol Machlekan B'Chalois B'Yad or B'Chli Pshita B'Yad B'Chli Tor Tenei Yachnis. Rabbi Racham raises another dilemma before Chizda with regard to the dough used for the high priest's griddle cake offering. With what would one divide it into the loaves of the offering, 6 in the morning and 6 in the afternoon? Was the division done with one's hand or with a measuring vessel? Because it said to him, it is obvious that it was divided with one's hand, as if one suggests that it was done with a measuring vessel. Would one bring scales into the temple courtyard for this purpose? V'yachnis kivan divi klala ktiv lav orach divi klala. Oh, no, it's divi klala with a curse. Yeah. Rabbi Mercham responds, and let him bring scales into the courtyard. Rabbi explains, since in God's admonition of the Jewish people, the act of weighing bread is written as part of a curse. When I break your staff of bread, 10 women shall bake your bread in one oven, and they shall deliver your bread again by weight. And you shall eat and not be satisfied. Leviticus 26:26, as weighing bread is generally performed only at a time of famine. Therefore, it is not proper conduct to weigh the dough in the temple. Shalom. Midi Mikadesh Lechem Kamatzim Nami Mikadesh or Dilma Dechazi Le Mikadesh Dilo Dila Chazele Lo Mikadesh. Rabbi Racham raised another dilemma for Chizda with regard to the showbread table. What is the halacha as to whether it consecrates handfuls removed from meal offerings or from frankincense that were not consecrated by being placed in a service vessel, as they should have been, but were instead placed on the proper part of the table between the rows of the showbread? The Gemara clarifies the dilemma. Does one say that from the fact that the table consecrates the loaves of showbread placed upon it, it follows that it also consecrates handfuls placed upon it? Or perhaps the table consecrates only that which is fit for it, meaning the loaves, but it does not consecrate that which is not for it, such as the handles. Amarle Einu Mekadesh Eini. Okay. Eini, is that so? Rabbi Yochanan לדברי האומר תפחי מכסה כויפל נמצא שולחן מקדש 15 טפח למעלה לדברי האומר תפחיים כופל נמצא שולחן מקדש 12 טפח למעלה. Rav Chisda sets in the table does not consecrate these handfuls. Rabbi Yochanan retorted, is that so? But didn't Rabbi Yochanan say the showbread loaves were longer than the length of the table? Accordingly, it was necessary to fold the edges of the loaves in order that they would rest entirely upon the table itself and not protrude past its edges. How much of each side needed to be folded is subject to a Tannaitic dispute concerning the length of the table. C96a. According to the statement of the one who says that one holds 2.5 handbreadths from each side of the loaves, it emerges that the table consecrates 15 handbreadths above it, as there were 6 loaves on each side of the table, which were each 2.5 handbreadths high, and according to the statement of the one who says that one folds 2 handbreadths from each side of the loaves, it emerges that the table consecrates 12 handbreadths above it. Rabbi Yochanan stated that the table consecrates that which is placed above it, regardless of whether it is fit for the table or not. Amrlei, Eina Mekadesh Karev, Ela Mekadesh Patliv. So, Rabbi Chisda said to him, when I said that the table does not consecrate the handfuls, I meant that it does not consecrate them to the extent that they can be satisfied on the altar. But it certainly consecrates them to the extent that they will be disqualified by the same distractions that apply to handfuls that were consecrated by being placed in a service vessel, for example, by being left overnight, or by coming in contact with a ritually impure person who had immersed that day. Okay, now new Mishnah. Sheva midas shalach. Hayu b'mikdash hin b'chatzi hin v'shlishi sahin v'rvi sahin. There were 7 measuring vessels of lepers in the temple. There was a vessel of 1 for him, meaning 12 log. There were vessels used to measure the oil and wine meal offerings and libations that accomplished the sacrifice of an animal. For a bull, there was a vessel of 1/2 a hin, 6 log, and for a ram there was 1/3 of a hin, 4 log, and for a lamb there was one quarter of a hin, meaning 3 log. Log. In addition, there was a vessel that held. There was a vessel that held 1 log to measure the oil for all standard meal offerings, and another one that held 1/2 of a log for measuring the water used in the rite of a woman suspected by her husband of having been unfaithful, the sota, and also for the oil used in the loaves accompanying the thanks offerings, the 88a, and another one that held 1/4 log for measuring the water used in the purification of a leper, and also for the oil used in the wafers and loaves, and the Nazarite brings on the day that his term of Nazarite ends. Rabbi Eliezer bar Yitzchak Omer Shinasais Hayu Bahin Ad Kan Lepar Ad Kan La'il Ad Kan Lekebis. Rabbi Eliezer, son of Rabbi Tzadok, says it was not necessary to have external vessels of different sizes, rather there were graduations on the vessel. It held 1 hin, indicating that until here, here's the quantity needed for the bull, and until here is the quantity needed for the ram, and until here is the quantity needed for the lamb. Okay, Rabbi Shimon Omer lo haya shamin וכי מה היה ההין משמש אלא מידת יסר שלוג ומחצה יסר שם שביד היה מודד למנחה כהן גדול log mechze b'boker log mechze b'harbayin. Rav Shimon says there was no vessel there in the temple. It held one hin, and as what purpose could a one hin vessel serve? That volume of liquid was never used. That volume of liquid was never used in an offering. Rather, there was an additional measuring vessel of 1.5 log therein the temple, which completed the tally of 7 vessels, with which one would measure the oil used for the griddle cake meal offering of the high priest. 1.5 log were used in the morning and 1.5 log in the afternoon. Zog the Talmud. Talmud Rabban Sheva Midas Sholach. Hayu b'migdash Revis log v'chati log v'log v'revis ahin u'shlishi ahin v'chati ahin v'hin Ziv Rabbi Yehuda Rabbi Meir Omer hin v'chati hin u'shlishi ahin v'revis ahin v'log v'chati log v'revis ahin. Rabbi Shimon Omer lo haya sham hin v'chima haya hin mishamesh. The Gemara says the sages taught in Brayta there were 7 measuring vessels for liquids in the temple. I listed in ascending order of size as they held 1/4 of a log and 1/2 of a log. 1 log, 1/4 of a hin. 1/3 of a hin, 1/2 of a hin, and 1 hin. This is the statement of Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Meir says that there were these 7 vessels, but he lists them in descending order. 1 hin, 1/2 a hin, a hin, 1/3 of a hin, 1/4 of a hin. The name log has 1/2 a log and 1/4 of a log. Rabbi Shimon says there was no vessel there in the temple that held 1 hin, and what purpose could a 1 hin vessel serve? The volume of the liquid was never used in an offering.